Welcome once again to the One and Only Way Ministries. I'm Herman C. Avery Jr. I'm your host. We're brought to you each week by the Progressive Community Missionary Baptist Church. Now that's the place where everybody is somebody. Jesus Christ is Lord of all. There we promote quality and not quantity. We're located at 3600 West Imperial Highway. That's Inglewood, California. Our zip is 90303. We're also brought to you by the Heritage Music Foundation, where Dr. Margaret Pleasant Duro is the CEO, and they're located at 601 East 99th Street, Inglewood, California. Currently, in this month of March, we're having what we call our March Gospel Festival. Each Monday night, we celebrate some part of gospel, whether it be traditional, contemporary, spiritual, even quartets. We will have young and old and new. And so check the ACC for dates, times, and places. Well, not only are we sponsored by the Heritage Music Foundation, but we're also sponsored by the Love of God Missionary Baptist Church, the place where God is on our side, and Reverend Antoine Garrett is the pastor there. And they're located at 2222, that's 4 2s, West West Florence Avenue, and the zip is 90043. Finally, we're brought to you by the Greater New Bethel Baptist Church, where Dr. Earl A. Pleasant is the pastor, and that's the place where Christ is always the featured attraction, and they're located at 601 East 99th Street, Inglewood, California, and the zip is 90301. Well, my brothers and sisters in television land, as we inform you or re-inform you every week that we come to you with a Sunday church school lesson, we hope that it doesn't matter whether you're a Sunday church school teacher, a Bible teacher, a Bible student, or someone who's just interested in the Bible, that anyway, we provide you information that will either help you in your ministry or help you in day-to-day living. Well, we're just getting underway real good in this spring quarter, where we're going to talk about God, the people, and the covenant. Last week we talked about the ark comes to Jerusalem. This week we're going to talk about God makes a covenant with David. And last week the reason why the ark, bringing the ark back to Jerusalem, was so important because inside the ark they had the covenant, the 10 commandments that God made through Moses. And so that's the Ark of the Covenant. And that's what we're talking about. But God now makes a covenant. Now, that was a covenant with Israel, but God makes a covenant with David. We're still in the book of Chronicles, but now we skip from chapter 15 to chapter 17. And we're going to look at what David notices. That's chapter 17, verses 1 and 2. How God reacts. That's 1 Chronicles chapter 17, verse 3, verse 4. And then we will go 6 through 8a. And then what God promised us. 1 Chronicles chapter 17, verses 8b through 14. So let's go look at this first topic. What David notices. Now it came to pass, as David said in his house, that David said to Nathan the prophet, Lo, I dwell in the house of cedars, but the ark of the covenant remaineth under curtains. Then Nathan said unto David, Do all that is in thine heart, for God is with thee. We're talking about a covenant, and this, so I make it clear even before we get to the actual covenant. I want you to understand that a covenant is simply an agreement between two parties. Each party makes some various promises, and they note some obligations and conditions whether they be implicitly expressed or implied expressions. And somebody said, what do you mean by implied? Well, sometimes you don't have to state it straight out. It can be a covenant based on actions, based on intent, that if somebody else looks at that, even though there are some conditions and promises, that there were some other things that were implied in that covenant agreement. It's an agreement. If you will, then I will. If you meet these conditions, then I will give you these promises. And so that's what a covenant is all about. And so David, one day, sitting in his palace, he was like that before. That's why he said, well, look, I got a palace, but there's nowhere for the ark. So he said, I'm going to make a tent so that we can put the ark in the tent. But after having the ark around for a while, David draws another conclusion. He says, even though I probably have done well establishing a tent to house the ark in, but that still is not fair. Here I am, I got all this glorious cedar. I'm in a cedar. I got a house of extraordinary wood. But the ark is still housed under curtains. And listen, my brothers and sisters in television land, that seems to be a thread that runs through mankind from the beginning of time to now. We think more of ourselves than we do of God. Oh yeah, we think about God and we love God and we do all of that, but when it comes to having and giving, we don't give God as much as we give ourselves. Hello. We don't give God as much as, and we get away with it because he didn't ask us for as much as we asked of ourselves. He only asked us to give 10% plus an offering. And so most of us don't even do that. A lot of us give it. We write it on our envelope so that people don't know it ain't. We put it in the tithing box when we know it's not really a tithe. And when we put tithe in, we don't get no offering. And some of us give an offering. We give 2 offerings and we call one of them a tithe. But we don't give God what he's really due. At least David thought about it. He said, God is due more than what I have given him. I placed, the ark represented his presence. So I placed him in a tent and I sat in the palace. Even when others come to visit and be in his presence, they must worship in a tent while I sit on my throne in the palace. David said, I need to rectify this. I need to do something about this. So I think what I'm going to do is, instead of having, he called them curtains, cause I don't know how they look, I guess because you can draw them back and draw them up and open them up and close them like curtains, that he called them curtains. And evidently he was, wasn't evident, it says when he was in the presence of Nathan the prophet, he told him that. And so Nathan's response to David was, do all that's in thy heart, for God is with you. I think what Nathan was saying, said, even though he was king, the prophet, if he was doing something wrong, the prophet was supposed to make him aware of that. And it's no doubt that Nathan had done it before, or Nathan will do it in the future. But at this point, Nathan says, if that's what you really want to do, King, do it, because I believe that God is with you in the matter. And so If that's what's in your heart to do, then do it. And listen, my brothers and sisters, here we go again. Every idea we get, everything we get and want to do for God, even though ostensibly it looks good, it may not be ours to do. It may not be for us to do. And even though we get the blessings of some man of God, perhaps, it sounds good to me, because, things sound good to us. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. It sounds good to us. And sometimes I think we do that without inquiring of God, both prophet, preacher, and subject. Is this a thing that you want us to do? Am I in your will? Am I doing really what you want me to do? Sometimes even in this ministry that I bring forth here this Sunday church school lesson, I ask, God, is this really what you want to do? Is it really doing any good? Am I helping anybody? You ask yourself, because sometimes it gets tough, sometimes it gets hard, and if you think you're doing this for naught, and it's real, and just every now and then, God will send somebody by to let you know that you're doing it. I was in the grocery store, and this little girl, she was about 12. She saw me, and she got excited. And I heard her say, that's him, that's him. And she ran and got her mama, and she brought her mama and said, that's him, mama, that's him. In person, right here in front of us. And so I started talking to the little girl. Well, what do you mean, that's him? She said, well, I watch you every Saturday. I see you, I watch you, I listen to you. I said, well, that's good, thank you. I hope I help you. And by that time, my mother chirped in and said, yeah, she watched you every Saturday. And she got me to sit down and watch you, and now we watch you together. God has a way of letting you know, I do believe, when what your good is doing is good for somebody. And so David decides to do this good thing, this good deed. So, and let's see, even though it's a good deed, let's see how God reacts to David's thoughts and ideas and things. And that's found in 1 Chronicles 17, verses 3, 4. And then we're going to skip through 6 through 8a. And it says, and it came to pass the same night that the word of God came to Nathan, saying, go and tell David, my servant, thus saith the Lord, that thou shalt not build me a house to dwell in. Whosoever I have walked with, all of Israel, spake I a word to any of the judges of Israel, whom I commanded to feed my people, saying, why have ye not built me a house of cedars? Now therefore thus thou say unto my servant David, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I took thee from the sheepcote, even from following the sheep, that thou shouldest be a ruler over my people Israel. And I have been with thee whithersoever thou hast walked, and have cut off all of thine enemies from before thee, and have made thee a name. Okay, I don't know, there were 2 or 3 parts there. I probably should have stopped a little sooner. But God says to the prophet Nathan, comes to him, I don't know, in a vision or whatever. We know that whatever it was, it came at night, and God talked to Nathan the prophet. Says, I got a message for David. You go tell King David this. Don't forget, David, first of all, who you are. You're only my servant. You don't get to think for me or like me. You will not build me a house to dwell in. And I believe it's in verse 5 where he tells us, and the reason is, David, you're a murderer. You got blood on your hands. You killed Uriah so that you could have his wife. And I'm sorry. even this kind of deed. The only thing, David, that I can really accept from you is your worship, your praise, your repentance, your remorse. Those things I can accept. But I don't really need a favor from you. And look, David, this is why. And listen, it's true. And this is why I think Nathan got caught up in it. He said, wheresoever I have walked with all of Israel, and I've walked with you, I have not told anybody. I didn't tell any of the judges. I didn't tell any of the Moses. I didn't tell Abraham. All I told them to do was feed my people. I have not commanded them to build me a house of cedars. When they were out in the wilderness, yes, I told Moses to build me a house, a tent, because it had to be portable. I wanted a tabernacle, a place, and it had to be portable that they could move from place to place. Never asked them to build me a permanent house because I'm not a permanent God. You won't find me in one place because I'm everywhere. I'm using my imagination now. Maybe I'm speaking for God, but that's the way I see it. That's the way I interpret it. He says, so go tell David that this is what I've said. David, you got to remember who you are and how you got where you are. You remember, I found you out there shepherding sheep. You were with the sheep coat, taking care of sheep. You were following behind them sheep. But then I took you from following sheep as a shepherd to be a shepherd over my people Israel, to be a ruler over my people Israel. And here it is. I have been with you wherever you have gone. David, I've been with you through thick, through thick and thin. Even when you messed up, David, I knew you had a good heart. Even when you went against my will, didn't do the things that you knew you ought to do, then did some things that you knew you shouldn't have done, I was with you. Because, David, I really knew that you had a good heart. Your heart always followed after me. And I don't think some people understand that even sometimes in our going and coming, even in our doing, even though we love God, and a lot of us, we mess up. Yes, I don't know about you. I always tell folks when I throw up my hands and I'm saying something, I say, I don't know about you, but this means I'm guilty. I don't have to look at anybody else. I don't have to look at David. I don't have to look at Moses. I don't have to look at Peter. I don't have to look at none of those folks. I don't have to look at Paul because I know what I have done. And I'm guilty of, as much as I love God, and I want you to know, I know who he is. I know who his son is. I love him with all my heart, soul, mind, and spirit. But every now and then, I mess up. I just flat out don't. Sometimes in my exuberance to do the right thing, I mess up. But then there's sometimes I just do the wrong thing, period. Because in my flesh, that's what I want to do. You might as well fess up and tell the truth, because God knows the truth anyway. We had this saying when we trying to convince people that we doing the right thing, we know we doing the right thing, we say to them, well, you know, God knows my heart. You may not like what I've done. You may not agree with what I've done, but God knows my heart. And yeah, you better be careful, because that is the problem. It ain't about what people think. It ain't about what they say. But it is about that God knows your heart. And so he tells David, says, you know, I need you to go. I ain't asked no, I've never in all of these years that Israel has been my chosen people, had I declared to them, make me a building. Okay? And so, let's see what happens in this final thing. See what God promises David. What God promises. That's 17b through 14. 8b through 14. And so he says, and I have cut off all of thine enemies before thee, and have made thee a name like the name of the great men that are in the earth. Also I will ordain a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, and they shall dwell in their place, and shall be moved no more. Neither shall the children of the wickedness waste them any more as at the beginning. And since the time that I have commanded judges to be over my people, moreover I will subdue all thine enemies. Furthermore, I tell thee that the Lord will build thee a house, and it shall come to pass, when thy days be expired, that thou must go to be with thy fathers, that I will raise up thy seed after thee, which shall be of thy sons, and I will establish his kingdom. And he shall build me a house, and I will establish his throne forever. And I will be his father, and he shall be my son. And I will not take my mercy away from him, as I took it from him that was before thee. But I will settle him in mine house, and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forevermore. According to all these words, and according to all of this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. And so David has Nathan to relate to David. Said, look, remember, I was with you wherever you're with, and all you're doing. Not only that, I kept your enemies from taking. You know, David had been in some tough spots that it would have been hard to get out of, and God delivered him. And no wonder he wrote, in the time of trouble, he'll hide you in his pavilion. Because David says, I was hiding in a cave. And the enemy was just as close. I could reach out and touch the hem of his garment. But God had his spiders to weave a web of protection over me, where they looked and said, he can't be in there. If he had gone in there, he would have broke the spider's web just that quick. David was among his enemies when Saul was chasing him, chased him into enemy territory. And under the guise that David had lost his mind, God saved him from his enemy. God has a peculiar way. So he said, David, I walk with you. How else do you? No wonder he wrote, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. No wonder. And he says, I have made you a name like no other name in there. And you know, we all still celebrate, and especially Israel with the Star of David. They think there's none in Israel today like King David. Nobody measures up to King David. I dare say Moses, who they think a whole lot of, won't have the same, not on equal, maybe in the same class, but not on an equal level with David. They love King David today. He says, I'm going to make my people a place. I'm going to settle them down once again and put them in a place where they shall never have to move again. And wicked folk won't overthrow them like they've done in the past. And he says, and since the time that I ordained judges to be over my people, listen, I will subdue all of thine enemies. And furthermore, I'm going to build you a house. And this house that he was talking to David about wasn't a cedar house. It wasn't a house, brick house. But he was talking about a house, a name, a household name, you know, like we talk about his house. his heritage is to come to pass. When you're gone, when you're done, and you sleep with your fathers, that your son, one of your sons, I'm going to raise up one of your sons, and because the blood was on your hands and you couldn't build my house, I'm going to let him build your house. And I will establish his throne forever. In other words, his name, and I will be his father, he will be my son. And watch this, there's been some great discussion as to whether Solomon was saved and lost, because Solomon was David's son that he has built the temple. Because he messed up with that woman he married and let her build them altars and things. And some believe that maybe he had turned from God. And because of that, Solomon was lost. Solomon did not get into the kingdom. It says right here, I will not take my mercy away from him, as I took it from Saul, who was before him. Ooh, what a contrast. And he says, and I will settle him in my house and in my kingdom. Settle me like to make permanent. Hello. So if there's any question about whether Saul was saved or not, Solomon was saved or not, is right here. I think God had said, don't worry, tell David that your boy will be all right with me. And according to these words, Nathan told David all that God had told him. And to further add to that, later on, Jesus, when he was given an example, used Solomon for one of his examples. And if Jesus and God didn't think much of Solomon, I don't think that he would even use him for an example. But he used him for example. That God's Solomon, as great as he wasn't as great as God's creation. And so he makes a covenant with David that I will give you a household name. And so, my brothers and sisters, again, the clock on the wall says it's time to go. We got to get out of here. Once again, I hope we've done something to help you. Address, telephone number, email address, website address, write us, call us, email us, download us from the website to your computer and view these lessons at your leisure. So until next time, may God bless you, may he keep you, and please tune in again.